Well, it's a great delight to be able to spend a few minutes in conversation with our preacher for the second Sunday of the great season of Easter, the Venerable Brenda Burney. Brenda is Archdeacon of the Eastern region of the Diocese of Gippsland and Rector of St John's Parish in Bairnsdale. And Brenda's one of the members of the diocesan staff as an Archdeacon, and over the next few Sundays we'll be hearing from other members of diocesan staff and also the canons of the Cathedral, and I'll be spending a little bit of time in conversation with each of them after those services. So Brenda, thank you so much for driving all the way from Bairnsdale under the current restrictions to be with us for a pre-recorded service that, as Susanna said in the introduction to the worship, is reaching thousands of people online, so it's a wonderful ministry to so many. Thank you.
My pleasure. It was good to be able to go further than the outskirts of Bairnsdale.
Indeed. So Brenda, in your sermon today you referenced some of your theological education with Dorothy Lee, who I was also privileged to have as a mentor and teacher and indeed a colleague, and it'd be lovely to hear just a little bit about your journey in ministry. Of course, you're a local Gippsland girl, having come to Morwell at the age of 4 with your family and been in the region ever since. How did you move in those early stages through to becoming the Archdeacon of the Eastern region?
Gosh, it's a quantum leap, isn't it? I guess church was always a part of family life, so I guess you call me a cradle Christian. I've never known a time where our family hasn't gone to church and where I had faith. And so I guess it was natural. My parents were very involved in church life in many facets. My dad was even on bishop in council for a long time. And so even in the wider diocesan family life, we always had knowledge of that and one or two parents participating in different things. And I guess it was natural for me just to slip into some of those roles. I have great parents and great respect for them, and they're great role models, and I think that I saw in them that it was life-giving, not only for them but for the wider community. It was part of that whole community feel, team effort. I always talk about the team effort, but that's kind of what it was. It was just a really life-giving thing for me. It's about putting back, but you also get a lot out of the things that you put in. So I can remember going to Sunday school. I loved Sunday school, loved learning, and I loved hearing the stories from the Old Testament and the New Testament, even though it's probably done in ways that we wouldn't do now. But it kept me going, and it kept me interested. And then later on, when I was 13, we had confirmation classes, and those confirmation classes became a youth group after that. Young Anglican Communicants, we called ourselves YACS at St Mary's in Morwell. But my confirmation was, I guess, a significant time for me. I made my promises. I gave my life to Christ then. I really meant it. It wasn't just something, I know we say a lot of children just go through it and they just do it to be done. Well, for me, it was a real journey of faith and actually giving my life to Christ. And so I ended up as a server quite young, in my early teens, in St Mary's at Morwell. Archdeacon Frank Lowe encouraged me to be a reader in my teens. So I found myself reading the Gospel a lot of Sundays. Later on, as a young parent, I became a Sunday school teacher when we didn't have Sunday school for children, then a youth group later, all those sorts of things. I was on parish council, youth synod. One of the most formative things, though, I think for me, if I go back a step, was Gippsland Young Anglicans. And when I first started going out with Rod, who's now my husband, he took me along to the camps at Raymond Island. So the first one was a youth camp that I went to, so I was a participant. And I remember going across on the ferry and having a whole group of young people on the other side to greet us, and having the most wonderful mentors at those camps. So the likes of Alan Huggins, Tom Binks, Graham McRobb was there, David McLeod, a whole lot of people that just were willing to be with us and share faith with us and mentor our journeys really, and with a whole lot of other young people who had the same questions and the same love for life, and just we were allowed to be ourselves, but we were also allowed to share our faith and practice our faith kind of apart from everybody else as well. So we spent a lot of weekends at Beckett Park, and then that led to leading summer camps for primary school children. So a leadership role, I guess, started then when I was probably 17 or 18. Beckett Park became, I guess, my spiritual home even at that young age, and it was almost when I was 18 that I had my call to ordination while I was on a camp at Beckett Park. I had my first tangible experience of the Holy Spirit, and I knew then that God was calling me to ministry. Didn't matter then, I didn't even think that women couldn't be ordained in the Anglican Church. That didn't even pass my understanding at that point in time. I just knew it was there. So that was sort of the beginnings of, I guess, what was forming over all those years.
Brenda, in your homily you referenced the journey of faith, and it's a lifelong journey. The journey continues, and so recently you were called to a new leadership position as Archdeacon. And I think when we spoke about that late last year, we had no idea of what was in store for us early in 2020. And I guess it'd be good to hear a little bit about what it was like to step into a new leadership role like that, having to face the enormous challenges of the bushfires from New Year's Eve through to early January and February, and then all of that kind of compounded by the COVID-19 restrictions. How was that for you in a new leadership role?
I think I said to you earlier on in the year that it was like a baptism of fire with the bushfires. So not only do you have to step up in your own community, but being the Archdeacon of the Eastern region, I also felt that great responsibility over the rest of the region there's under threat of the fires, and I particularly felt the isolation, the separation, and not being able to actually get to people and be with them to have that talk, and we had to rely on the telephone, Facebook, emails, all those sorts of things. And so I didn't know what I was supposed to do, because you don't get briefed about something like that as a parish priest or as an archdeacon. So I guess what you do is you just go, well, what do I need to do? I need to make sure that people are okay, and that if they're not, what can we do to help them? So I guess again it's that whole working as a team with you as our bishop, and you were just fantastic stepping up in contact with us while you were on holidays, which we felt really guilty about, but we knew we needed you at the same time, and your availability made it so much more easier, much easier for me and for the rest of us, knowing that we were all working together to try and support each other and do the best we could in those circumstances. So I felt really blessed to have a team around me, and I don't know, it was just one step at a time, I guess, working out what we needed to do next.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is so important to have that sense of collegiality, isn't it? That sense
incredibly important, because otherwise I can imagine, especially in some of the more remote areas here, like I'm not so remote because Bairnsdale's a big town, we have other towns quite close, but I can imagine what it's like when you are completely isolated, when the roads are cut and you've got no way in or no way out. So just making sure that we could support people, knowing we were on the end of the phone, and whatever we could do was so important. Yeah.
So Brenda, now with the COVID-19 global pandemic and the restrictions that have necessarily and appropriately come to us in the management of that, I guess the experience of isolation that some of those bushfire affected communities have been feeling in the early part of the year are now being felt in different ways by the global community, including our diocesan family. What have you noticed as parish priest in Bairnsdale in terms of the pastoral needs of your people with the COVID-19 constraints?
I think sadness was one of the first things that I noticed when we started to go into more and more isolation, you know, the distance apart, not being able to have as many people in church, not having our meetings, having to cancel Bible studies, and our outreach coffee group closed down the op shop. It just sort of kept being one thing after another, and I think there was a real sadness for people because our normal life, everything that was part of our normal life as a community and as a faith community, was gradually being taken away from us. And I felt that our people really felt an enormous sadness, and I think in the end it did impact on me on that Sunday the 22nd of March when or during that week even. I think it built up to that because I actually rang people and said, please don't come to church, people in those vulnerable categories, because I was also aware that we would have too many people in church on Sunday morning at our 8:15 service if everybody came. Rod and I measured the church with the measurements that were kindly set to us by the Diocese. We measured the church to see how many people we could have in there, and we had to rope off pews and separate chairs, and I mean, I was okay. I just went and I just did that, as you do, and I can do that. I know I can get up and just do things, but eventually I come to a point where it hits me. And after Sunday morning, when I said to people, well, this is probably the last time we're going to be able to meet together for some time, and I was honest, I said, I'm really going to miss you, and yeah, anyway, I went home and I actually felt the lowest I'd felt for a long time, and I said to you, it was anti-vocational. That was exactly how I felt. I could not be a priest in the way that I needed to be a priest and wanted to be a priest and was called to be a priest. That was so hard. That afternoon was a shocker. And there were no Easter eggs then.
And Brenda, recently we've had to find some new ways of being church and expressing our identity as the body of Christ when we can't gather for worship. And you spoke very helpfully in your homily just now about the Holy Spirit leading us in that ongoing journey into that new way of doing things. What are some of the responses that the faith community at St John's Bairnsdale have had in terms of being creative in this new space that we find ourselves in?
So for the most important thing for me was being able to stay connected to my people and my people to me, to us, all of us together really, to have some sense of connection so that wasn't taken away from us. So I don't like obstacles. I always try and climb over them, so I had to work hard at finding that way. So what we did was, one of the ways we thought, well, a lot of our people have email, so we got around and got everybody's email addresses that we could get, and did some group emails. And I think we've got 20 out of just over 100 people that don't have email. So we just do a letterbox drop to them every week. Easter we went door to door actually, and we had Easter eggs, palm crosses and a paper butterfly in a Ziploc bag, and the Easter booklet with Maundy Thursday, Good Friday and Easter services, and our parish paper with photos of people in it. And so we actually went to the door, Rod and I, with those for people, and it was just the joy on people's faces and the tears that you've actually come to the door. So we are videoing our services every week. We're not live streaming, we're not putting them out on a public forum, because I just decided that I wanted to make it as normal as possible for our congregations. And so we have our notices, and I might talk to them the same way that I normally talk to them, and on Easter Sunday I'll put rabbit ears on at the end of the service and through Easter eggs, and I would probably feel like I couldn't do that if it was on a live stream or a public forum. So we've had such a great response to that. We get such positive feedback, the team that's working with me to do that. And Rod, you know, my husband, he's stepped up into roles that he never dreamed and I never dreamed that he would have as a clergy spouse. So he's just been incredible getting that recording done and processing it and getting it right so that we can email it out to people. So people would send us back photos of them watching us on TV in their lounge rooms and waving their hands to songs. So we've added hymns in now and songs of praise. I've got someone writing intercessions. So my people at home are actually contributing as well. So every week I'm asking different people to come and help have, you know, an assistant, an organist, and enough people that we can have a service with that makes it sound a bit more more normal, which is great. I said to Rod after last weekend and the people who helped, that felt more like church to have more than just Rod and myself there. So that was uplifting for me as well. And I think people's creative skills, I had hundreds of paper butterflies made for me, and we're doing something for Anzac Day now. So people are contributing, and I guess it's looking for those ways that you can involve other people and do what, be church in the way that you can be church.
On the back of all that creativity and initiative, I wonder what some of the longer term learnings might be for us, Brenda, as a diocese, as a church more broadly, once we get through the immediacy of this crisis. Is it too soon to think about some of the things that we might want to take into the future, even once things begin to return to more recognisable patterns of gathering for corporate worship, which of course will be a great blessing, but what would be some of the takeaways perhaps from the experience that we're having at the moment?
I think we already know the answer, well, partly think that we can answer that, and it's always unfolding, so we don't know everything, and I'm always open to that. And I think that's where the Holy Spirit comes into all of this, is that we have to spend that time in prayer, listening and doing that. So one of the things I think is that, especially for us in East Gippsland, when we do have some remote parishes and we can't all get together so often, Zoom meetings are probably something that we can probably do more often when we can't get together. At least we can see each other face to face. I think that's important. So I think lots of us are learning new technological skills. I know I've been on a very steep learning curve. So we can put those to use, and we can also then teach other people to do things. And who knows what we might do with those skills into the future in terms of outreach, not just to our own people but into the wider community. I think pastoral care is something, and I think this is because of the bushfires with us as well, because we were just moving into a recovery time of that, and people starting to do building and cleaning up, and it's all gone down on a slow, it's slowed down now, and it's not forgotten, but it's also put on the back burner a little bit, and we've had to deal now with a different sort of isolation. And so we've realised, I think, a really holistic kind of pastoral care is coming out of this, and we've made good connections with people in the bushfires, and now I think we're reconnecting with another group of people, and the same people again in a different way, and making sure we keep up that pastoral care. So for me, it's kind of opened my eyes, and I go, there's something more that we can do. We need to carry this on. We need to start lifting it again, lifting the level of that when we come through this period of isolation. Hopefully the other thing that I think we've learned by having time, not driving our cars around as much and going to meetings as much, you do end up with a little bit more time, even though you're trying to think up ways of doing things in a different way. You do end up with more time, and if we use that time wisely in prayer and reflection, then I think we're nurturing our faith in a way that we perhaps don't when we're busy. Like, I know I'm a doer, not a beer. But for me, this has gone, well, this is my opportunity to be a little bit more and not to do. So what am I going to learn in that time? But it's also about reflecting on that and helping the people in our congregation to understand this is time when you can use that time with Jesus.
Yeah.
This is time when we can learn and grow together, not step away, let's do more. It's a chance for us to really get in touch with our faith in a different way.
Yeah, and it's so important, isn't it, to grasp the opportunities of a moment like this as well as confront the challenges.
Yeah. There was a quote, and I'll probably need to read it off a piece of paper if that's okay.
Here's one I prepared earlier.
Here's one I prepared earlier. So I get Richard Raw's daily meditations, daily contemplations, and a few weeks ago he put out there, to pray and actually mean thy kingdom come, we must also be able to say my kingdoms go. And that's something I've been reflecting on quite a bit lately, and I go, in this time of huge changes to our lives, we are learning what the most important things are. I think this is a really important time for us to learn in life, because you can see the world was on that treadmill, and we're always on that treadmill, but now we've had to get off that treadmill. What are the things I really miss? What are the things I need to keep? What's life-giving? What needs to go? It's kind of a trimming time, I suppose. What are things I really do miss?
Yeah, a chance to reset.
A chance to reset.
Yeah.
And so that little Richard Raw thing about the kingdoms in my life, I need to have one kingdom in my life that I focus on, and I need to build my life around that. Whereas so often it's the kingdoms of the world that kind of take over the kingdom of God.
And Brenda, what are some of the questions further to that you might have for us as a diocesan family, as an Anglican church, as a church globally? Things for us to think about as we embrace the gift of this time that you referred to.
Perhaps in the same way, what are the things that we don't really need to do in the old way? Can we do some of the things in a new way? Perhaps we can do more Zoom meetings so people are not having to travel so far, particularly thinking of when we come to have meetings in Sale. It's good to catch up face to face, never want to get rid of that. I think that's the most important thing. But maybe sometimes in the busyness of life around us, we don't get people to travel 2 hours to a meeting, that perhaps they can offer the same input from home or from their office, and then have that time where they would have spent 4 hours travelling, because I know I lived in a parish that was a long way from the centre of business in Sale once, and it did take like the whole day out.
Absolutely.
We can make better use of our time. I think that's one of the things.
Give the planet a rest at the same time.
And that was one of the things I was reflecting on too. The planet is having a rest at the moment. How awesome is that? And especially I think in East Gippsland, where the fires were, the planet needed a rest up there, and just time to rest and regrow, the same as we do. The planet is getting rest. So I just think we can look at all our structures and perhaps go, what's really important, to take our churches, our faith into the future, and not just as a diocese, but our relationships. I think this time has taught us too, especially during the bushfires, that other dioceses, we had so much support from other people. It was just amazing. So we should do a little bit more of that.
Well, Brenda, thank you so much for taking the time to have a chat this morning, and for the wonderful work you're doing as Archdeacon of the Eastern region. As we've heard, it's been a pretty challenging time for that ministry, and we're very conscious of the extra burdens that you and your colleagues in the East are carrying at this time, while the recovery effort for the bushfires continues and is now compounded and complicated, of course, by the COVID-19 restrictions and the further isolation that comes with that for people who are already traumatised by those events in January and February. So bless you in your ministry, and go well, and thank you again for today.
My pleasure. Thanks.